Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest blew audiences away as a member of the original casts of The Lion King, In the Heights, and of course, Hamilton, where he played George Washington. He's on CBS's Bull, and now you can see Christopher Jackson in a completely different kind of role in Ava Duvernay's incredible Netflix miniseries about the Central Park Five, When They See Us. Let's take a look.
Is my mom here?
It's just us. You and us. Who you were in the park with?
I don't know names. I just got lost.
Where did you see the lady?
One lady.
The female jogger was severely beaten and raped.
Every black male who was in the park last night is a suspect. I need all of them.
What's going on with my son?
Your son was involved in rape in Central Park.
No,
Wait a minute. Wait a second.
They saw you rape the lady.
I didn't see a lady or hit anyone. I didn't see any lady.
Kevin.
I didn't see any lady.
I want to see my son right now, right now.
Whatever they said I did, I didn't.
I know.
Nothing these boys state matches the central facts of the crime. All we need is for one to tie this whole thing together.
These tapes are not as clean as the state would have you believe.
There is injustice happening here.
There is not one shred of evidence.
Imagine the frenzy of these teenagers.
Ripping off her
They
clothes.
are innocent of these
They
crimes.
are guilty.
Why are you doing us like this?
What other way they ever do us?
I've been having these dreams. I keep hearing these footsteps. And they coming closer and closer. That's me. Coming to bring you home. They said if I went along with it, that I could go home. And that's all I wanted.
The police will do anything. Lie on us, they will lock us up, they will kill us.
This is my life.
I don't think we should admit to something that we didn't do.
Okay, we keep fighting.
Everybody, please welcome Christopher Jackson. Let's hear it. Sir, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on this series. Unreal, unbelievable. I was telling you in the green room, you know, knowing the story and having seen the documentary and being alive, of course alive, but being, you know, of age when they were being exonerated and when they were getting out of jail, and following the story and being very aware of the social repercussions that were happening and the way that people were talking about. I was worried about what was going to be brought to the miniseries that would be new for me. And leave it to Ava Duvernay to just bring the absolute best actors, the absolute best writing, and just incredibly beautiful performances and everything that goes into it. Really incredible stuff. Did you know Ava? How did you get involved in the project?
I was fortunate enough to meet Ava through Hamilton. She'd come and seen the show.
How many people did you meet through Hamilton?
Everyone. Like all the people.
You met Obama through Hamilton, right?
Yeah. The list is checked, like everybody. Everyone that I'd cared to
Who were you most blown away to meet? Obama?
Obviously, a very significant meeting. Toni Morrison.
Oh my God.
LeVar Burton. People that like shaped my thinking, shaped my way of thinking.
I don't know if I could handle meeting Toni Morrison. That to me is just like,
right?
You know.
No, she's just like the you know, as with many people after meeting someone after that show, everyone's open. You know, that show had a way of just breaking everyone down. So our stage became the biggest and best green room in all of New York, you know, and where real conversations got to happen. And when you were fortunate enough to meet another artist, you were having real artistic kind of conversations and just very vulnerable. You know, we just came off stage and they just got done experiencing it. And so it kind of...
Right, you're not sort of approaching them in their green room and being...
No.
Love their work. They're doing that to you.
Well, and it's not... let it not be considered some part of some ego exercise. It really is when artists just get to be artists. Status doesn't really play as big a part as you would imagine, and that's what's refreshing and comforting about an experience like that, an experience like this. When you get on stage, I was in high school watching Josh Jackson every every week rather, on Dawson's, which I was always happy to remind him of.
Were you really?
Yeah, I mean, because he's my,
You refer to him as Pacey on set?
I mean, he and I, his friendship throughout this process and since has been something I really value. But Blair Underwood, one of the first TV shows that I really kind of like grabbed a hold of was L.A. Law, just by happenstance of schedule and being able to like sit with him. I had met him previous, but to be able to work with these people is really significant. And of course, while we're doing this, it's moving. We're moved as artists, but we have no idea how it's going to be received. But that's why our greatest reach is to just find the nugget of truth and to stay in it and be in it as long as we possibly can. And look at the young men playing these roles. I mean,
unreal, yeah.
It made it really, really easy to be there.
Well, your character, what I loved about your character is that he's constantly being, nobody really believes in him, and the viewer is not necessarily supposed to believe in him from the start. And then he gets these great moments where he turns sort of all of that around very quickly and very succinctly.
Sure.
How much of that did you know? How much of the arc did you know about your character, or were you kind of going on a scene-by-scene basis?
Ava had given me a lot of, her team had put together a lot of research. I wasn't here when this case was happening. I was still living in Southern Illinois, and so my awareness of this whole case in real time wasn't very significant. I would see it on the nightly news when they would mention certain snippets, but we weren't in the 24-hour news cycle, and so deep diving on any news subject required more of a print media pursuit, and that wasn't really an option in a very small town covering local news. And the case was, they were incarcerated by the time I got here in '93, and then of course I followed it as we were, as I was, following news here once they were exonerated in the early 2000s. Here's the thing that I find really interesting is that I became more aware of the case through hip hop. Because at the time that this story is taking place, hip hop was an emerging form. And there were a lot of artists back then that were talking about it. There were a lot of artists that were affected by it. These kids came from the same streets that these artists that we listened to were talking about. My wife, who is a Bronx native and went to LaGuardia High School, was actually in the same school with Yusef. They passed each other in the hall. Her friends were friends with him, so they were sort of tangentially linked. And so, excuse me. And so I found, as I was attached to this project and as I was, moving through the space of preparing myself as best I could, I talked to my in-laws who were here at the time, who had a child that was on the street, playing in the street in the afternoons, and they were concerned. I found it really useful to speak to people who, as adults, were watching all of this unfold from the public, space, and how that affected their thinking towards their own children, and how they, were even more vigilant about making sure that their children were looked after and their neighbors' kids were looked after, which I think has a certain voice in this as well.
Making sure that their neighbors' kids were looked after from the police.
Of course.
Which is of course such a horrifying thing to have to do. How much did you know about the lawyer that you play?
Very little, unfortunately. Again, I met this project sort of the crux of shooting Bull and then sort of, jumping into this because, when Ava makes a call and says, hey, I want you to come and do this, you don't ask a lot of questions before you get to yes, and then afterwards you just try to catch up. So I was aware of who he is, but I didn't have the opportunity to meet him before. And fortunately for me, the writing was so succinct in terms of using my character as a means to further a very specific narrative inside of the story. So I had a lot of help in that. Ava was just right in my ear the entire time.
Did she tell you that, you're going to have these scenes where the idea is we're going to convey the character this way, and by this time that we get to a certain point, you're going to turn all that around and change it when we get to the courtroom?
Absolutely. There were moments where, my character was very cynical. A very high-profile case. I don't think that it's a leap to say, in the narrative that Ava
no
and the writers
experience
constructed.
with a case like this, right?
I'm sorry?
He had no experience with a case like this.
No,
right?
I believe he did.
Okay.
He was a criminal attorney, but he also had political ambitions,
Right.
which are sort of living out to this day. So I mean, there was a certain aspect of with any lawyer, you want to be attached to a high-profile case. Defense lawyer, criminal attorney, whatever you're doing, this kind of profile, kind of, that rising tide idea, and that everyone benefits from being a part of a really popular case.
He's a slick guy.
Well, an Armani suit is an Armani suit. It's a choice, right? When you put one of those on, it's a choice. In the 80s and in the 90s, and so yeah, that was kind of what he was working with.
When you get to that scene in the courtroom where you turn it all around and you change everybody's perspective on you, do you go into that scene playing it in a way that playing it for the audience outcome, or are you thinking about just what that character is?
No, I'm strictly thinking about what that character's thinking. I mean,
the rest to Ava and everybody else.
Fortunately, TV is not theater, so the audience isn't the same as it would be from a stage. You're not worried about that moment where the audience is going to, grasp or how they're going to react. I mean, the audience is removed while you're pursuing that moment, and then Ava makes it look the way she makes it look. A lot is in the edit.
The whole thing looks so beautiful. Bradford
really
Young
does.
did an incredible job shooting.
He's an
it.
incredible filmmaker.
A number of your scenes are with John Leguizamo, who plays the father of Ray. What is it like working with Leguizamo? It's a very different performance for John Leguizamo, and he does these every now and then where he plays reserved and quiet, and they're my favorite Leguizamo performances. It's like Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. You can kind of see all of that excitement and energy underneath the surface somewhere, but he's holding all of it back, and it's even more powerful because of it.
The trick that I think John Leguizamo plays on everyone is that he is one of the most incredibly trained actors that we've seen in our lifetime, which in my mind makes him one of the more brilliant actors of my generation. In that, there's no material that he can't really get to. I think that we've seen that. I think his career bears that out. He was just fantastic and very much in the process of collectively telling this story. He's a delight to be around all the time.
Yeah, when about two scenes of his into this, I was thinking to myself, Leguizamo deserves an Oscar role at some point soon. I don't think he's gotten one. I don't know if he's really been, I can't remember if he's been nominated, but it's like he's had a long enough and storied and amazing career at this point.
I think he's touched it. Maybe we haven't recognized it, but I think that he's touched it. Yeah. I think, don't you believe that our ability to perceive things is based around the amount of time that we've spent looking for things to perceive, looking for things to shape or change the way that we see things. An actor like that, an artist like that, he's done nothing but give award-winning performances his entire career. So at this point, Oscar okay, but it's not.
He's got multiple award-winning one-man shows. He's got worked with every great filmmaker you could work with.
Any of us would be over the moon to have his career.
What was, working with Ava Duvernay? Everybody, actors love her, cinematographers love her, producers love her. What is it about working with her on set that makes you confident and comfortable in what you're doing?
I think that she builds a set with love. And I don't mean to be corny. I think that she loves what she does, and I think that she makes it okay for other people to love what they do. There's not a single person on set that isn't valued and isn't reminded of their value daily. And then she sets a very high expectation. If you're as artists and we're creating or telling a story collectively, the moment that you stop that, then the truth goes somewhere else. Because now as actors, we're already worried about the million and one things, but when you can put that down and just be in the room, that's when the best comes out. That's when most of the roadblocks are removed, and you can just get to the kernel of truth, right? And I think that Ava's strength, especially in this project, is that we all knew how hard it was going to be. We all knew that eventually what the verdict that gets read and the children that we've spent all of these hours with at lunch and in between and during the shooting, we finished the verdict scenes and we finished that day and I went out in my car and I cried for 20 minutes before I could pull away because I felt as if I had somehow let these kids down. And not because I was trying to go into some sort of strange method actory place, but I simply the retelling of that moment, it hits you in a very real way. It's not we're not playing, We're not play acting.
Yeah, it's a real thing that happened.
Yes, the nausea in my stomach when they read that all of those guilty verdicts, and I look over at Marquise, and I want to throw up. There haven't been a lot of moments in my career where you just get to sit in something for so long until you don't. It's really difficult to distinguish what's the art and what's the life, you know. And it didn't feel good, but it felt true. And at the end of the day, I think there's honor to that, you know.
There's rightfully a great sense throughout the whole series, especially starting with the interrogations, of the tragedy of letting these children down. You know, there's a sense at the end of, you know, they have come out and they are good men. But I mean, right from the beginning, it really feels, you really get the weight of institutions just completely failing and letting these children down.
That's it.
Yeah.
But our country's racist.
Yes, yes, yeah. Routinely letting people down.
From the first day.
Yeah.
From before the first day. From the moment that those names were signed on that piece of paper declaring our independence, we were already in contract with slavery.
Oh, yeah. As soon as the boats came over here and
Our justice system is a reflection of our society. Our society is a reflection of the events that happen and then our ability to do something or to be inspired to do something about it. The truth is, and the thing that makes this so hard for me to watch, being a parent, is that we don't care about our children. We let them get shot in school. We let them get shot on the street. We let horrible things happen, such as the story about of these young men. The trick is that their story was never really supposed to be told. Because when we convict and we stow away, we put away, you know, young men, they're supposed to be done with. Yeah. When they come out, there's nothing afforded them in order to like rehabilitate, join society. So the caste system that they're now run through isn't meant to. We're not meant to hear from them again.
They're meant to be erased.
They're meant to be erased, forgotten. And because when you are then left with nothing, you end up back in the same place that you were put to begin with. You know, stories like this force us to take a really hard look at ourselves. You know, there was a time in which someone said, you know, our country is racist. Well, now everybody's up in arms, but nobody can look at the empirical data and come to any other conclusion. And I think that as we continue to tell these stories, we continue to see ourselves and our humanity inside of these stories. Continue to remind ourselves that we have to do better. We just have to.
Do you think that our ability to tell these stories more now and in a more mainstream fashion, I think, than maybe we were 20, 30 years ago, and maybe even more often, could lead to better change and more change?
I think it's important because it reminds us of those certain things. I think it's important because we're constantly needing to do better and we're constantly failing at doing better collectively, societally. I think that Hollywood is a really poor. It's a very shallow place to find true value in our humanity, right? But what it does do is it does remind us that we should be looking for it. I think it reminds us that we should be trying to do better. And that, honestly, that's from a rom-com to a story like this. Like, you know, there's value in storytelling. As an actor, and a musician and a writer, that's the thing that I'm most interested in creating. But that's the lens that I see it through. And honestly, I think if we do want to do better, we have to continue to make things like this and engage with stories like this and engage with ideas that are presented in pieces like this. Because again, we can't get any better until we see exactly who we are. Yeah. And then, and only then, can we find some sort of better place to be and a better path to walk. And not only that, but just to help the person next to you understand it a little bit more too.
Yeah, I just have this sense sometimes, and this is tangential, excuse me, we'll get back to questions in a moment, where we lament this moment so much and we think our country has gone crazy right now, and we're oftentimes freaking out about Donald Trump, and yes, he is insane and horrific. And I think about when I was 20 years old in 2002, and we were about to go to war in Iraq, and we were in Afghanistan, and you couldn't even have conversations about racial violence in the United States without the majority of people getting upset or being like, no, I can't talk. We can't talk about race. And there is something to be said about this moment where it feels like everything is, or at least a lot more is out in the open, and a lot more conversations are actually happening.
Well, because it's totally not going to get any better by, doing what we've been doing.
Of course.
Right? And it's everyone's perspective is so vital and so important to the conversation. But we just have to acknowledge this. We have to acknowledge the reality of our present, our distant past, and our most recent past, and the plan or idea for what can happen in the future.
Yeah, I think as much as the people who are in power right now are unwilling to do those three things that you just said, I think that more people within the borders of America are actually doing those things and are willing to do it than were, say, 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah,
they're more educated.
Yeah, I think that
Actually.
I just think that the stance that we all have collectively about our connection with social media, our connection with Twitter, it's kind of a false, it kind of creates a sort of a false sense of reality, right? Because I think that it in a country without comedians, in a country without nuance, in a country without the satire and the things that really kind of poke our own sense of the world, like it becomes a very binary choice, right? Like the idea that you either believed the Central Park Five, now the exonerated Five, or you believed law enforcement, right? Life is not binary. The human experience is only gray. Yeah. It's never black or white. It's only gray. There are moments of inflection that cause us to take a certain direction, right? But then that's just for that moment. And then the ramifications, the consequence, the inevitability of certain actions sort of lead us down certain paths. But there's nothing binary about our existence. There's nothing one identifier that keeps us in a very particular module, and that's, I think, a lot of what happens, unfortunately, with the social media aspect of it, right? It doesn't inspire conversation. It only kind of allows you to say you're either A or B. But you can only be those two in that particular environment. It forces you to be like, I'm A, and then you got to find a person that you can go talk to and say, and this is why.
Or this is bad, get it out of here, get it out
yeah.
of here. Rather
or
than
just
like,
take
this
a break.
is a nuanced conversation that we could have. It's good to hold more than one idea about something in your mind at one time.
Yeah, because I think that my interest is in the people. My interest is in the connection, right? As an artist, all I'm really interested in having are connections with people, be it an audience, be it other actors, be it directors, or whatever have you. I'm not dependent on politicians to say the right thing, or quite honestly to do the right thing. Because again, if we're looking at the current state of things, and historically they rarely do the right thing until until they're forced in a particular political position.
A couple questions from the audience. Who has a question? Hi.
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 My name's Camilla, and my friend, he was in When They See Us, the first episode, and I wanted to know how it was to get into character.
To get into character, wow. I think it's different for everyone. For me, putting on that wig, it changed a whole lot for me. I am sort of one of those actors that loves to be completely immersed as much as I can be. With this project, I found, because it was such a different set than I'm accustomed to, all the moving parts, there were 4 or 5 Steadicams going all at once. Like, it was everything that could be caught was being shot all at once, every take. So for me, it was about understanding my immediate space, my immediate surroundings, down to the clothes that I had on, and just kind of trying to put it together that way.
Sorry, they had 4 or 5 cameras going at once.
Ava shot all the footage, like all of it.
Even in the courtroom?
All of it.
That's so interesting, because it doesn't feel that way when I'm watching it. Oftentimes, I feel like you can feel someone who's throwing a bunch of cameras in the room, and everything feels essentially cut to shit eventually. This feels like there's a lot of, still feels like there's a fair amount of craft behind it.
It was all craft. Yeah. It was all purposeful, and it wasn't just sort of like just throw a bunch of Steadicams.
Exactly.
But even, I mean, it felt to me like even through the court, like while we were shooting, I would catch a camera op's eye, and I would see their facial expression. They literally were they were actors in the play. They were quite literally, they did not seem intrusive. It didn't feel like anybody in that room didn't belong there.
It's everything that you want as an actor.
And every way, in every possible way. And also, again, it's what Ava says. Ava says, this is what we're doing, then you do it. Right. Because why would you doubt it? You know what I mean? There's not a moment where you feel like anything that she's doing is going to betray the capturing of the feeling that you're trying to.
The last thing that you want is to do an incredibly emotional scene, look up and your grip or somebody is checking their email on their phone.
And that
there
just wasn't. There's just I never saw it.
Yeah, there are a number of filmmakers who don't allow phones on set or anything like
Understandably,
that.
yeah.
One more.
Hi.
Hi. I was just wondering if you talked to your original castmates from Hamilton, In the Heights, and even like The Lion King.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time?
Yeah. My writing partner and my big brother I met doing Lion King back in '97. Lynn, I enjoy harassing on Twitter at every possible moment. And yeah, our Broadway companies, especially those who are fortunate enough to have a long run, you do become family. You do, and especially when you leave. It's one thing to see someone 8 shows a week for however many years, but you become a family, and when you learn how to work together, you learn each other's rhythms, you remember each other's birthdays, you just consider them in a way that's more than just sort of a coworker type existence, and you love them, and
especially
I do love
the original
them.
casts, right? Because I mean, you're doing the original cast of In the Heights and of Hamilton.
Sure.
You're workshopping that stuff with them
For years.
Before that, for years.
Yeah.
So Lynn is sending you material, showing you new material. You're singing it with him. You're coming up with stuff.
6
with him.
years in development with Heights, I think around another 6 with Hamilton, and then Freestyle of Supreme, which I do with Lynn.
Yeah.
That was the sort of interim time where we traveled the world doing that. Like, we're just artists, man. We just try to find a room to get in and do something creative, and that's really, I think, how a lot of this stuff happens. And credit to Tommy Kail for finding ways to keep us all engaged, as much as possible.
You've written songs for some musicians, right?
I've written a lot of songs for Sesame Street.
For Sesame Street.
And I was a co-music supervisor for the Electric Company when it rebooted in 08, 09. And I did that with Bill Sherman, who was also the orchestrator for Heights and worked on the Hamilton album. So, we have a crew, and we roll pretty deep, and we trust each other because we've worked in the trenches for so long together, and we've had weddings and funerals and births of children and endless interaction, endless friendship, and
They're the first people you call.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You get something, someone gives you the money to go make something or do something.
Sure.
They're the ones you trust.
Yeah, and then just being able to share good things, share good news, share bad news. I mean, my favorites on my phone they're all my crew. They're people I've been on stage with for the better part of 2,000 or 3,000 performances of various things. So they're just my guys and gals, man. And there's how fortunate am I to be able to boast that I have the kinds of friends that I have, not because they're necessarily successful, which they are, but the fact that they're such great human beings and that they put up with me and my
Chris,
growth.
You said 2,000 to 3,000 shows. One of the things that I'm always so fascinated with when it comes to actors and performers, and maybe even sometimes in the chair that I sit in, is the ability to go on stage and do the job that you have to do in the face of whatever's going on in your personal life, no matter what. Do you know, what is the hardest event that you've had to go on? You've well, I still have to go do Hamilton. I still have to play George Washington tonight, and I've got to give it my all.
Well, the election was probably the most recent. Yeah. 2 days after 9/11, I was back at the New Amsterdam Theater singing a song, Endless Night, to a house that had maybe 200 people in it that holds 2,000. And seeing just, that was probably the hardest night I've ever had as a performer. But on Broadway, you experience deaths, you experience births, you experience sleepless nights with your kids, but you go to work, and it's all relative. The reality is that because of the repetition, because of the moments that become so familiar to you, it allows you're able to pretty much shut the world out for 2.5 hours.
Is it easier to do that with a Broadway performance than it is to do on the set of a TV show or a movie?
Almost certainly. There's nothing that's repetitive on a TV show.
It's all hurry up and wait.
Well,
so
when you're done with
in your head.
yeah, but then you could shoot a scene, 40 different times. You could literally do it 40 times or more, and then it's gone, right? So I mean, because once they've got it, you're not going to do it. You get all of the different coverage, and then you're done, and then you have to like make your day and move on, do other stuff. But it's theater provides an oasis emotionally once you're in it, because it's so difficult. It's a tightrope walk, and you're not going to be out on the tightrope thinking about 50 other things. You've got that very specific task at hand, and that provides a lot of cover, a lot of solace, and a lot of like just focused energy in the midst of whatever chaos might be occurring outside of the theater.
Right, theater, you're in the moment
Yeah.
for 2-3 hours. TV film, you're like in the moment, you're out of the moment. You're in the
Sure.
The whole job of TV film is trying to find ways to keep yourself in the moment while everything else is happening around.
Absolutely, and we're 4 seasons into Bull, and I'm still learning how to do it better because of the way that it happens, and because it happens sort of seemingly out of nowhere. You get on set, you're waiting for 3 minutes for a light to get hung or for something to get changed, and then you rehearse, and then you do it. And then they're changing the angle, and then you get some direction, and they change the angle again, and it just sort of, it's just a different set of muscles that you have to exercise on a daily basis.
How have you found that you do that? How you keep yourself in the moment? Do you sort of protect your space as an actor so that you can do it, or
No,
are you able to?
If I have a difficult scene to shoot, which I have had a few on Bull, I'll give myself I'll sequester myself a little bit just so that I can really kind of stay honed in. The last thing that I ever want to do as a TV actor, first and foremost, is waste the crew's time. Right. They're there 10 times longer than anybody else. They never get mentioned. They rarely get thanked. And so I have a lot of respect for what they do. And so part of how I approach my thing is to just make sure I've done my work and that I'm prepared in terms of like knowing my lines and having an idea, that I talk to the director. And then like there's nothing about the experience on a TV set that makes me want to isolate or makes me want to sort of dive back to the chairs and not talk to anybody. Like the whole thing that makes it worth doing is the communal aspect. There are 100 people on the stage at any given point. I wanna get to know most of those people. I want to know what their kids' names are. I want to be able to like know what's happening with them. I think that certain jobs can be isolating, and I don't like being isolated. I like being in a collective. I like it that we're a symphony making this song out of thin air. I love that. Yeah. That to me is like the coolest part of what I get to do.
And that must have been so cool to go from a place where you're such a massive part of the symphony to When They See Us, when you just sort of have to dive in and sort of like play your solo pretty quickly and land it, and then you can get out of there.
Yeah, but if you're first chair violin in the Philharmonic, your first chair,
Yeah.
you
gotta nail
but you're
it.
not the whole orchestra. It isn't just about you, and that's the part I grew up playing team sports. It's all I cared about. Fortunately, there's a great sort of connection between that mindset and the kind of work that I've been able to do in the theater and now in film and TV. Because, again, at the end of the day, you want to know that you help somebody else get there too, because somebody else helped you get there, and that's a really cool. And on those long days where you feel like you're watching the paint dry, that's the part that makes it worth it. Yeah.
Well, it's so good to have you back here, man. Thank you so much for coming in and being a part of When They See Us. It's currently on Netflix. It's truly an incredible piece of work. Everybody give Christopher Jackson a huge round of applause. Let's hear it.